I thought paying for a dream vacation for both our families would finally bring us closer. Instead, it ended with my mother-in-law screaming in a hotel lobby, police officers questioning me like a criminal, and security footage revealing a betrayal I never saw coming. One that didn't come from her, but from her own daughter. I've replayed that week in my head more times than I can count. Not because I want to relive it, but because it still feels unreal. One moment I was standing on a sunlit balcony, convinced I'd done something genuinely good for the people I loved. The next, I was sitting in a bland hotel office, palms sweating, while a police officer asked me if I'd ever stolen anything before. This all started with what I thought was a generous, maybe even healing idea. I'm a 36-year-old guy, married to my wife, Emily, for 6 years. We've had our ups and downs like any couple, but one constant challenge has been her family. Specifically her mother, Linda. Emily is kind, thoughtful, and endlessly patient. Linda is not those things. She's the kind of person who can find fault in a sunrise. Too bright, too early, wrong angle. From the first time Emily introduced us, I sensed the tension. Linda didn't like that I worked long hours. She didn't like that I didn't come from money. She didn't like that Emily moved 2 states away to be with me. And she definitely didn't like that she couldn't control our lives the way she used to control her daughters. Still, I tried. I really did. I called her on holidays. I sent flowers on her birthday. I nodded politely through backhanded compliments and helpful advice that somehow always suggested I wasn't good enough. I told myself that if I just kept showing up, eventually she'd see I wasn't the villain she'd made me out to be. That mindset is what led me to the vacation. The idea came after a particularly rough year. Emily and I had both been burned out from work. Her parents were dealing with health issues. My own parents hadn't taken a real vacation in over a decade. One night, sitting on the couch scrolling through travel photos, Emily sighed and said, "I wish our families could just relax together for once. No drama, no stress." Something clicked in my head. I'd recently gotten a promotion. Nothing flashy, but enough that I finally felt like I could do something big without panicking over our savings account. I started looking at resorts, somewhere warm, safe, family-friendly. I imagined shared dinners, laughter, maybe even a moment where Linda would look at me and think, okay, maybe he's not so bad. I know now how naive that sounds. I booked a beautiful resort on the coast. Ocean views, spacious suites, activities for everyone from my parents to Emily's teenage niece. I covered the flights, the rooms, the meals, everything. When I told Emily, she cried. She hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe and kept saying, "You didn't have to do this?" Even as she smiled like she hadn't smiled in months. Telling my parents was easy. They were grateful, almost embarrassed, but excited. Telling Linda was tense. She went quiet on the phone when Emily explained the plan. Then she said, "That's generous," in a tone that made it sound like a question, a suspicious one. She asked a dozen questions: where, when, what kind of room, what airline, what time the shuttle ran. I answered all of them patiently. Finally, she said, "Well, I suppose we'll see how it goes." That should have been my first real warning. The first day of the trip was picture perfect. Clear skies, warm air, that salty ocean smell that makes you feel lighter the moment you step outside. My parents were thrilled. Emily was glowing. Even Linda seemed neutral, which for her was practically enthusiastic. That didn't last. Within hours of checking in, the complaints started. The room was too cold, then too humid. The pillows were wrong. The view wasn't what she imagined, even though it was exactly what the photos showed. At dinner, she frowned at the menu and asked the waiter if they had anything more traditional, then sighed loudly when he explained the options. I caught Emily watching her mother with that familiar mix of embarrassment and resignation. I squeezed her hand under the table and whispered, "It's okay." I meant it at the time. By the second day, Linda had appointed herself the unofficial critic of the entire resort. The breakfast was too crowded. The pool was too loud. The staff was confusing. She made a point of telling me each issue directly, as if I were personally responsible for the temperature of the sun or the behavior of other guests. I kept smiling. kept apologizing, kept telling myself that this was temporary. A week. I could handle a week. Then came the earrings. Linda owned a pair of diamond earrings she never stopped talking about. They were her pride and joy, something her late mother had given her, something she'd mentioned at least 3 times a day since we arrived. She wore them to dinner every night, reminding anyone within earshot to be careful around her because they were very valuable. On the 4th morning, everything exploded. I was halfway through my coffee when Linda stormed into the breakfast area, face red, eyes wild. She slammed her purse onto the table and said, loud enough for people to turn and stare, "My earrings are gone." The table went silent. Emily asked gently, "What do you mean, gone?" "I mean stolen," Linda snapped, her gaze snapping toward me like a loaded weapon. "And I think I know exactly who took them." The words hit me like a slap. I laughed at first, not because it was funny, but because my brain refused to accept what she was implying. "Linda, that's not. You paid for this whole trip," she interrupted sharply. "You've been in and out of everyone's rooms. You know exactly where I keep my things." I felt every pair of eyes on me. My parents looked horrified. Emily stood up so fast her chair scraped the floor. "Mom, stop," she said. "That's a serious accusation." Linda crossed her arms. "Then where are they?" I didn't have an answer, and apparently that was enough for her. She turned on her heel and marched toward the front desk, announcing over her shoulder, "If no one here takes this seriously, I'll call the police myself." I thought she was bluffing. I was wrong, and that was only the beginning. I wish I could say I stayed calm when Linda marched off toward the front desk, but the truth is my chest tightened in a way I'd never felt before. There's something uniquely terrifying about being accused of a crime you didn't commit, especially in a public place, far from home, with people you barely know watching it unfold. Emily followed her mother immediately. I hesitated for half a second, then stood and went too. My parents stayed behind, stunned, whispering to each other in disbelief. As I walked across the lobby, I could already hear Linda's voice rising, sharp and cutting, like she was trying to carve her version of the story into the air before anyone else could speak. "I want to report a theft," she said loudly to the front desk clerk. "My diamond earrings were stolen from my room." The clerk blinked, clearly caught off guard. "I'm very sorry to hear that, ma'am. We can certainly help you file a report. Do you know when they went missing?" "This morning," Linda snapped. "And I believe I know who took them." Emily stepped in front of her mother slightly, her voice firm but controlled. "Mom, you don't know that. You're making assumptions." Linda scoffed. "Oh, please. Who else would it be?" I felt heat creep up my neck. "Linda, this has gone too far," I said. "I did not take your earrings." She finally turned to face me fully, eyes narrowed. "Then you won't mind if the police sort it out." That word, police, landed heavy. The clerk asked us to move to a quieter area, and within minutes we were seated in a small office off the lobby. Linda was practically vibrating with indignation. Emily sat beside me, her knee bouncing uncontrollably. I could feel how shaken she was, torn between loyalty to her husband and disbelief at her mother's behavior. When the police arrived, the room felt smaller, colder. The officer was polite, professional. He asked Linda to explain what happened. She told her story with dramatic flair. How she'd left her earrings in her jewelry case. How she'd gone to breakfast. How she'd returned to find them gone. Then she gestured toward me. "I believe my son-in-law took them," she said plainly. The officer looked at me. "Sir, is that true?" "No," I said, probably too quickly. "Absolutely not." "Have you been in her room today?" "Yes," I admitted. Briefly. She asked me to help her adjust the thermostat earlier. Emily was there too. Linda seized on that. "See," Emily spoke up. "I was with him the entire time. He didn't touch her things." The officer nodded, taking notes. He asked me a few more questions, where I'd been that morning, if I owned any similar jewelry, if I'd ever had issues with Linda before. Each question felt like another small cut to my dignity. I answered calmly, even though my stomach was in knots. Then the officer said something that made Linda stiffen. Ma'am, we'll also need to consider everyone who had access to your room. Her lips thinned. Of course. What about your daughter? He asked. Or anyone else staying with you? Linda waved a dismissive hand. My daughter would never steal from me. Emily flinched. I didn't say anything. At that moment, I was too busy grappling with the surreal reality that this was actually happening. I had paid thousands of dollars to bring our families together, and now I was being treated like a criminal because of it. The officer explained that without clear evidence, there wasn't much they could do immediately. He suggested checking with hotel security, reviewing keycard logs, possibly looking at hallway cameras. Linda agreed instantly, clearly confident that this would all end with her being proven right. As the officer left to speak with security, Linda leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms, looking almost satisfied. This didn't have to be this way, she said coolly. If you just told the truth. Emily snapped. Mom, stop. You're humiliating him. He humiliated himself, Linda shot back. I always said you rushed into this marriage. That did it. I stood up, my hands shaking. Not with fear this time, but with anger. I have done nothing but try to be respectful to you, I said. I paid for this trip. I welcomed you. And now you're accusing me of stealing from you with no proof. Her eyes glittered. People who have something to hide always get defensive. Emily looked like she might cry. Mom, please, she whispered. This is destroying everything. For a brief moment, I thought Linda might soften. Instead, she turned away. We waited in that room for what felt like hours, though it was probably only 30 minutes. The silence was heavy, broken only by the hum of the air conditioner and Emily's quiet sniffles. I stared at the floor, trying to ground myself, trying not to imagine how this would look if it escalated. Reports, records, whispers. Finally, the officer returned, accompanied by a hotel security manager. We've reviewed the hallway footage from this morning, the manager said, and we checked the keycard logs. Linda straightened, smug, and the manager hesitated. The footage shows several entries into your room today. Not all of them match the timeline you described. Linda frowned. What does that mean? It means, the officer said carefully, that we need to ask a few more questions. He turned not to me, but to Emily. My heart skipped. Ms. Carter, he said, can you tell me who else has access to your mother's room? Emily looked confused. Just us, me, my husband. And, she stopped. Linda's head snapped toward her daughter. And who? Emily swallowed hard. My sister, Sarah. The room went very quiet. Linda let out a short, incredulous laugh. That's ridiculous. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something shift. A crack in the certainty. And somewhere deep in my gut, a realization began to form. This story was about to take a turn none of us were prepared for. When Emily said her sister's name, it felt like someone had knocked the air out of the room. Sarah? Linda repeated, her voice sharp with disbelief. Why would you even bring her up? Emily looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. She glanced at me, then back at the officer. Because she's staying in the adjoining room with my mom, she said quietly. And she has a key. Linda scoffed immediately. That's absurd. Sarah would never steal from me. She's my daughter. The security manager cleared his throat. Ma'am, we're not making accusations. We're just trying to establish who had access. Linda waved him off. You're wasting your time. This is clearly a distraction. But I noticed something then. Something small, but telling. Sarah wasn't in the room. Up until that moment, she'd been oddly absent from the chaos. During breakfast, she hadn't been at the table. When Linda stormed off to the front desk, Sarah hadn't followed. At the time, I hadn't thought much of it. Now it felt strange. The officer asked, Is your other daughter on the property right now? Linda hesitated for just a fraction of a second. Of course she is. Would you be willing to ask her to join us? He said. Linda's jaw tightened. That won't be necessary. Emily spoke before I could stop her. I can go get her. Linda shot her a warning look. Emily. But Emily stood up anyway, her hands shaking. If this is going to be cleared up, then we should clear it up. She left the room, and the silence that followed was unbearable. Linda stared straight ahead, her lips pressed together so tightly they turned white. The officer flipped through his notes calmly. The security manager avoided eye contact with everyone. I sat there feeling a mix of dread and something else. Hope, not because I wanted this mess to land on someone else, but because for the first time since the accusation, it felt like the truth might actually matter. A few minutes later, the door opened. Emily came back with Sarah. Sarah looked irritated more than worried. She was in her late 20s, stylish, confident, and very used to being the favorite. She glanced around the room and frowned. What's going on? Why is there a cop? Linda immediately stood. It's nothing, honey. Just a misunderstanding. Sarah's eyes flicked to me, then away. A misunderstanding about what? The officer spoke evenly. Ma'am, your mother reported a missing item from her room. We're just asking a few routine questions. Sarah shrugged. Okay. Did you enter your mother's room this morning? He asked. Sarah didn't answer right away. Yeah, I went in to grab my charger. Linda turned toward her. You didn't tell me that. Sarah rolled her eyes. I didn't think it mattered. The officer nodded. Did you notice anything unusual while you were there? No, Sarah said quickly. Too quickly. I wasn't the only one who noticed. The officer tilted his head slightly. Are you sure? Sarah crossed her arms. Yes. The security manager cleared his throat again. Ma'am, the hallway footage shows you entering your mother's room twice this morning. Once around 8:15, and again around 9:40. Sarah frowned. So, the second time, he continued, you left carrying a small pouch. The color drained from Sarah's face. Linda laughed nervously. This is ridiculous. That could have been anything. The officer looked at Sarah. Can you tell us what was in the pouch? Sarah opened her mouth, then closed it. She glanced at her mother, who was staring at her now. Not angrily, but with something closer to panic. I don't remember, Sarah said. Emily's voice was barely above a whisper. Sarah, Linda snapped. Enough. This is harassment. But the officer remained calm. Ma'am, if the earrings are found, this can all end quickly. Sarah swallowed. I didn't steal anything. No one is saying you did, he replied. We're just asking you to help us understand. Another silence settled over the room, heavier than the last. Finally, Sarah sighed. Okay, fine. I went into Mom's room because she asked me to check on something earlier. I took the pouch because she said I could borrow it. Linda spun on her. I never said that. Sarah's eyes flashed. Yes, you did. Emily looked between them, confusion written all over her face. Mom? Sarah? What's going on? The officer leaned forward slightly. Ma'am, he said to Linda. Did you give your daughter permission to take the pouch? Linda hesitated. Just long enough. And in that hesitation, everything changed. Because when the truth finally surfaced, it wasn't just the earrings that would be exposed, but years of favoritism, denial, and a betrayal that would tear their family apart in ways no one saw coming. Linda's hesitation lasted maybe a second. But in that second, the entire room shifted. No, she finally said, too stiffly. I did not tell her she could take anything. Sarah let out a sharp laugh. Wow, really? You're doing this now? Emily looked like she'd been slapped. Sarah, what are you talking about? The officer raised a hand gently. Let's slow this down. Sarah, you said your mother gave you permission. Linda, you're saying she didn't. That's a direct contradiction. Linda straightened her posture, chin lifted. My daughter is confused. She must be. Sarah stared at her in disbelief. Confused? Mom, you literally told me last night to grab the pouch if I needed it. That pouch, Linda snapped, had my jewelry in it. Sarah froze. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily's eyes widened. Wait, Sarah, did you know the earrings were in there? Sarah's mouth opened, then closed. She looked around the room like an animal searching for an exit. I didn't think. The officer leaned forward, his tone still calm but firmer now. Ma'am, this is important. Did you know the earrings were inside the pouch when you took it? Sarah rubbed her temples. I mean, I figured they might be. Linda gasped loudly. How dare you? That was it. The moment everything unraveled. You told me to take it, Sarah shot back. You said you didn't want to wear them to breakfast and that I could hold on to them. I never said that, Linda insisted, but her voice wavered now. Emily stood up slowly, her hands trembling. Mom, she said quietly. Did you ask Sarah to take the earrings? Linda's eyes flicked to her younger daughter, then away. This is not about that. The security manager finally spoke again. Ma'am, at this point, the simplest solution would be to locate the earrings. Sarah, do you still have the pouch? Sarah hesitated. It's in my room. The officer nodded. Would you be willing to retrieve it? Sarah swallowed. Yes. Linda opened her mouth to protest, but no sound came out. We all stood and followed Sarah down the hallway. I could feel Emily's tension beside me, her entire world cracking open in real time. She'd spent her life defending her mother, explaining away her behavior, believing her version of events. Now that foundation was shaking. When Sarah unlocked her room, the officer stayed by the door while she went inside. She came back holding the familiar velvet pouch. My heart was pounding. She opened it. Inside were the diamond earrings. No damage, no mystery, just sitting there, exactly where they'd been all along. Emily covered her mouth. The officer exhaled slowly. Thank you, he said. That clears things up. Linda stared at the pouch like it was a live grenade. This doesn't mean anything, she said weakly. She must have taken them without realizing. Sarah spun on her. Without realizing? You accused my sister's husband of stealing. You called the police. Linda's voice rose. Because I thought he did. I finally spoke, my voice quiet but steady. You didn't think. You assumed. The officer turned to Linda. Ma'am, based on what we've found, there's no evidence that your son-in-law took the earrings. Linda crossed her arms defensively. Well, I suppose mistakes happen. Emily stared at her mother in disbelief. A mistake? She repeated. You nearly ruined his life. The officer looked at Linda carefully. Ma'am, making a false accusation is serious. At the very least, an apology is in order. Linda's lips pressed together. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at Emily. Instead, she said, This whole situation has been very stressful for me. That was the moment something inside Emily broke. No, she said, her voice shaking but loud. This was stressful for him, for us, and you don't get to just brush it off. Linda snapped back. Don't talk to me like that. I will, Emily said, tears spilling now. Because I'm done pretending this is normal. Sarah looked down at the pouch, suddenly very interested in the carpet. The officer cleared his throat and explained that since the earrings were recovered and no crime had been committed, no charges would be filed. He warned Linda about making accusations without evidence and left it at that. As soon as they were gone, Linda turned to me. Well, she said coolly, I suppose this is over. I met her gaze. It's over for me. Emily looked at me, startled. I did something nice for this family, I continued, and you repaid it by humiliating me and involving the police. I won't forget that. Linda scoffed. You're being dramatic. Emily stepped between us. No, you are. She took my hand. We're leaving. Linda's eyes widened. Leaving? The vacation isn't over. Emily shook her head. It is for us. As we walked away, I felt a strange mix of relief and grief. Relief that the truth was out. Grief for the family Emily wished she had, but maybe never truly did. And as we packed our bags that night, I thought it was finally over. I was wrong, because what happened next, what Linda did after being exposed, would hurt even more than the accusation ever did. We left the resort the next morning. Not quietly, not politely. We packed in silence. the kind that buzzes in your ears and makes every zipper sound too loud. Emily barely spoke except to apologize again and again. Apologies I kept telling her she didn't owe me. Still, I could see the weight on her shoulders. This wasn't just about the earrings. It was about something she'd been carrying her whole life and had finally been forced to look at head-on. We booked the earliest flight home. My parents chose to stay, though my mom hugged Emily tightly and whispered, "None of this is your fault." I knew they were uncomfortable staying anywhere near Linda, but they also didn't want to abandon the rest of the family completely. Emily understood. I did too. Linda didn't come to say goodbye. Neither did Sarah. On the plane ride home, Emily finally broke down. She cried quietly at first, then openly, her face buried in her hands. I held her the entire time, feeling helpless and angry all over again. Not at her, but at the damage one person could cause and then walk away from. "I don't understand," she kept saying. "She never even apologized." "She probably doesn't think she did anything wrong," I said gently. Emily shook her head. "That's the worst part. When we got home, I thought distance would help. Space, time, a chance to breathe. Instead, things escalated. 2 days after we returned, Emily's phone started buzzing nonstop. Calls, texts, voicemails, all from Linda. At first, Emily ignored them. Then she listened to one voicemail on speaker while I was in the room. "You embarrassed me," Linda said, her voice cold. "You chose your husband over your own mother. I hope you're happy." Emily's face crumpled. Another message followed minutes later. "I raised you better than this. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me?" Then came the one that made my stomach drop. "You know," Linda said, "people are already asking questions about why the police were called, about what really happened. It wouldn't look good if certain details came out." Emily stared at the phone in disbelief. "Is she threatening us?" I felt something harden in my chest. "Yes," I said. "She is." That night, Linda posted on social media. She didn't name names. She didn't have to. She wrote about ungrateful children, about being betrayed by family, about trusting the wrong people. The comments poured in, friends and relatives sympathizing, offering support, validating her version of events. Emily's sister, Sarah, liked the post. That hurt Emily more than anything else. "She stole the earrings," Emily whispered, "and she's letting Mom blame us." I wanted to confront them both, to lay out every detail, every fact, every lie. But Emily asked me not to, at least not yet. She needed time to process what this meant for her relationship with her family. A week later, Linda called again. This time, Emily answered. I sat beside her, listening as Linda spoke in that familiar, patronizing tone. "I think we should move on," Linda said. "Families forgive." Emily replied quietly, "You never apologized." Linda scoffed. "For what? Nothing was proven." Emily closed her eyes. The earrings were in Sarah's room. "And?" Linda snapped. "That doesn't mean she stole them." Emily's voice trembled. "Mom, you accused my husband of a crime. You called the police." There was a pause. Then Linda said something I will never forget. "Well," she said, "if he hadn't paid for the trip, none of this would have happened." I saw Emily's face change. That was the moment she realized the truth. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't stress or embarrassment or pride. This was control. This was blame. This was a refusal to accept responsibility at any cost. Emily ended the call. She blocked her mother's number. Blocked Sarah's too. For days afterward, our house felt different. Quieter, sadder, but also lighter in a strange way. Like a storm had finally passed, even if it left wreckage behind. "I don't know if I can have a relationship with them anymore," Emily said one night, staring at the wall. "At least not like before." I took her hand. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you." She leaned into me, exhausted. I just never thought the truth would cost this much. Neither did I. But we were about to learn that standing up for the truth sometimes comes with a price. And sometimes that price is the end of a relationship you spent your whole life trying to save. The weeks after Emily blocked her mother were some of the hardest and quietest of our marriage. At first, the silence felt unnatural. Emily was used to constant contact with her family, even when it hurt her. Now there were no daily texts, no passive-aggressive check-ins, no emotional landmines waiting in her inbox. Just nothing. And nothing, it turned out, was loud. She went through waves. One day she'd be calm and resolute, saying she felt relieved. The next, she'd sit on the edge of the bed, staring at her phone like she expected it to light up on its own. "I keep thinking she'll realize how wrong this was," Emily admitted one night, "that she'll call and actually say sorry. I didn't know how to tell her the truth without hurting her." Instead, life forced the issue. About a month after the trip, Emily's aunt, Linda's sister, reached out to me directly. That alone was unusual. She'd always been polite but distant, careful not to step into family conflicts. Her message was short. "Can we talk?" I asked Emily first. She hesitated, then nodded. "If you want to." We spoke on the phone that evening. "I don't want to cause problems," her aunt said carefully, "but I think you deserve to know what's being said." My jaw tightened. "About us?" "Yes, and about you." She explained that Linda had been telling relatives that the vacation incident was suspicious, that she'd felt unsafe, and that she still believed I'd had something to do with the earrings, even if they were found later. "She's saying you manipulated the situation," her aunt said quietly, "that the security footage was misleading." I felt a familiar anger rise, but this time it was steadier, colder. "That's not true," I said. "I know," she replied. "That's why I'm calling." When I told Emily, she didn't cry. She just went very still. "So she's still doing it," she said flatly. "Even now." That night, Emily made a decision. She wrote one message, just one, and sent it to her mother before blocking her again on the last platform she hadn't checked. It wasn't long. It wasn't angry. It said, "You accused my husband of a crime he didn't commit. You never apologized. You continue to lie about him and about what happened. Until you can take responsibility, I'm choosing distance. This isn't punishment. It's protection." She stared at the screen for a long time after sending it. "I don't know if she'll ever change," Emily said softly, "but I can't keep breaking myself hoping she will." I pulled her into my arms. "I'm proud of you," and I meant it. The fallout was immediate. More relatives stopped reaching out. A couple unfollowed us online. Sarah posted vague quotes about loyalty and family above all else. Linda made herself the victim in every version of the story she told. But something unexpected happened too. Emily started sleeping better. She laughed more. She stopped bracing herself every time her phone buzzed. She began therapy, not because she was broken, but because she wanted to understand why she'd spent so long excusing behavior that hurt her. One evening, after a session, she said something that stuck with me. "I always thought love meant enduring," she said, "but I'm learning it can also mean walking away." For me, the anger slowly faded, replaced by clarity. Linda never saw me as family. She saw me as a threat to her influence, her control, her version of reality. The earrings weren't the real issue. They never were. They were just the excuse. And Sarah? She vanished from our lives entirely, choosing silence over accountability. That hurt Emily deeply, but it also confirmed something she'd suspected for years, that her sister had been protected at her expense. Months passed. We rebuilt routines. We took a smaller, quieter vacation, just the two of us. No drama, no accusations, just peace. One night, sitting on our balcony at home, Emily turned to me and said, "If you hadn't been there, if you hadn't stood your ground, I think I would have apologized to her again, even after everything." I shook my head. "You don't owe anyone your dignity." She smiled, a real one. "I know that now. We thought the worst was behind us. But closure, I learned, doesn't always come from apologies. Sometimes it comes from the moment you realize you don't need one anymore." It's been almost a year since that vacation. Time has a way of sanding down the sharpest edges, but it doesn't erase the shape of what happened. It just makes it easier to look at without flinching. People sometimes ask if I regret paying for that trip. The honest answer? No, but not for the reason they expect. I don't regret it because it showed me the truth, clearly, unmistakably, and all at once. A few months after everything settled, the resort emailed us. It was a routine follow-up at first, thanking us for staying and asking for feedback. At the bottom of the email was a note referencing the prior incident and offering to provide any documentation if we ever needed it for our records. Out of curiosity, I asked for it. They sent over a summary report and, attached to it, still images pulled from the security footage. Emily sat beside me as we opened them. There was Sarah, entering Linda's room early that morning. There was Sarah again, leaving with the pouch. And there was Linda later that same day, walking calmly to the front desk, before the accusation, before the police, before everything. Emily stared at the screen for a long time. She knew, she said quietly. That was the final piece. Linda hadn't just been wrong. She hadn't just jumped to conclusions. She knew her earrings were safe. She knew Sarah had taken them. And she still chose to accuse me. Not out of panic. Not out of confusion. But because, in her mind, I was the safest target. The outsider. The one she already resented. The one she believed people would question before they questioned her. Emily didn't cry this time. She closed the laptop and said, "I'm done." And she meant it in the healthiest way possible. No more hoping. No more waiting for accountability that would never come. No more twisting herself into knots trying to earn love that was always conditional. We didn't send the footage to anyone. We didn't post it. We didn't confront Linda with it. We didn't need to, because the point was never to win. It was to stop losing ourselves. Emily sent one final message to a group family chat before leaving it for good. It was calm, factual, and brief. She didn't argue. She didn't defend. She simply stated that false accusations had been made, that the truth was known, and that she was choosing peace over conflict. Some relatives quietly reached out afterward. A few apologized. Others stayed silent. Linda never responded. And that told us everything. Today, our life is smaller, but it's real. Holidays are quieter. There are fewer obligatory phone calls. No walking on eggshells. No bracing for the next accusation disguised as concern. Sometimes Emily still grieves the mother she wished she had. I grieve the relationship I tried so hard to build. That doesn't disappear overnight. But grief and clarity can exist at the same time. If there's one thing this experience taught me, it's this. Generosity doesn't obligate you to tolerate mistreatment. Family doesn't mean immunity from consequences. And truth has a way of surfacing, whether people are ready for it or not. I paid for a dream vacation hoping to bring two families together. Instead, it exposed a lie that had been hiding in plain sight for years. And as painful as that was, it gave us something better than approval. It gave us freedom.